Sarah Harper had once promised herself that she would never return to Cedar Hollow, Kansas. It was the small American town where everyone knew everyone else's business. It was also the place where Sarah had argued with her father, Walter, packed one suitcase, and left home at the age of 21. More than 20 years had passed, but the anger between them had never completely disappeared. Sarah built a new life in Denver. She married a charming man named Ryan, raised 2 children, and worked as a receptionist at a dental office. From the outside, her family looked happy. But appearances can hide painful truths. Ryan was always starting new businesses. Each time, he promised that the next idea would make them rich. Instead, every business failed and left them with more debt. Whenever Sarah questioned him, Ryan blamed her. "You never believe in me," he would say. "Maybe I would succeed if my own wife supported me." Sarah wanted to keep her family together, so she stopped asking questions. Then one morning, she woke up and discovered that Ryan was gone. He had emptied their bank account, taken the family car, and left a short message on the kitchen table. "I need a new beginning. Please don't look for me." Sarah stared at the message for a long time. Her 16-year-old son, Ben, found her sitting at the table. "Where's Dad?" he asked. Sarah folded the note and placed it in her pocket. "I don't know." 9-year-old Gracie entered the kitchen carrying her stuffed rabbit. "Is Daddy coming back?" Sarah looked at her daughter's frightened face. She could not answer. Within 3 weeks, Sarah lost the apartment. Ryan had not paid the rent for months and had hidden all the overdue notices. Sarah had no savings, no car, and nowhere to take her children. At last, she made the phone call she had avoided for 20 years. Walter answered after 6 rings. "Hello. Dad, it's Sarah." There was a long silence. "I know who it is," Walter said. Sarah closed her eyes and swallowed her pride. "I need help." Walter did not ask what had happened. He only said, "Come home." Walter Harper lived above an old roadside diner called Evelyn's Place. The diner had once belonged to Sarah's mother, Evelyn, who had died 11 years earlier. After her death, Walter had locked the doors and never opened them again. The faded red sign still stood beside the highway. Evelyn's Place. Hot meals, good company. When Sarah and the children arrived, Walter was waiting on the porch. He was 71 now. His hair was white, his shoulders were bent, and he walked with a wooden cane. But his serious blue eyes had not changed. Gracie ran toward him. "Are you Grandpa Walter?" Walter looked surprised. "I suppose I am." Gracie hugged him before he could stop her. Walter stood stiffly for a moment. Then he slowly placed one hand on her shoulder. Ben remained beside Sarah with his headphones around his neck. Walter looked at him. "You must be Ben." Ben nodded but did not smile. Walter picked up one of their bags. "You can stay in the rooms upstairs," he said. "But I don't have much money." "We won't stay long," Sarah replied. Walter stopped walking. "That is what you said the last time." Sarah understood what he meant. When she had left Cedar Hollow, she had told him she would return in a few weeks. She never did. Life inside Walter's house was uncomfortable. Walter woke up at 5 every morning. Ben slept until noon. Walter liked silence. Gracie asked 100 questions before breakfast. Sarah tried to find work, but Cedar Hollow had only a few stores and small businesses. Most of them were not hiring. One afternoon, Sarah went downstairs and entered the closed diner. Dust covered the tables. Old menus still stood beside the napkin holders. A clock shaped like a coffee cup had stopped at 2:17. Behind the counter was a photograph of Evelyn smiling in a white apron. Sarah touched the photograph. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. She opened a drawer and found an old notebook. Inside were names, dates, and meal orders. Beside many of the names, Evelyn had written, Paid by another customer. Sarah carried the notebook upstairs. "What is this?" she asked Walter. Walter looked at it and smiled faintly. "Your mother's kindness book." "What did she do?" "If someone couldn't pay, she gave them a meal. Other customers would leave extra money to cover it." Sarah turned another page. There were hundreds of names. "Why did you close the diner?" Walter looked toward the window. "This place belonged to your mother. Without her, it was only a room full of empty chairs." That night, Sarah had an idea. "What if we reopen it?" Walter immediately shook his head. "No. We could serve breakfast on weekends." "No. It might help us earn some money." "No. It might also save the building." Walter looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Sarah placed a tax notice on the table. She had found it under a pile of newspapers. Walter owed almost $18,000 in property taxes. A development company had offered to buy the diner and tear it down to build a gas station. "You were going to sell it," Sarah said. "I was going to do what was necessary." "Without telling me." "You left. I didn't think you cared." Sarah wanted to argue, but she knew he was partly right. Gracie entered the room holding a piece of cardboard. She had written 3 words in purple marker. "Nobody eats alone." "What is that?" Walter asked. "A sign for the diner," Gracie said. "Mom said Grandma gave food to lonely people." Walter looked away, but Sarah saw tears in his eyes. The next morning, he placed the diner keys on the kitchen table. "One weekend," he said. "That's all." The family spent the next 2 weeks cleaning Evelyn's place. Sarah washed the kitchen. Gracie cleaned the menus. Walter repaired the old coffee machine. Ben refused to help. "This town is dead," he complained. "The diner is dead. We should go back to Denver." "We have nothing in Denver," Sarah said. "I had friends there." "You also have a family here." Ben laughed bitterly. "Dad left us, you and Grandpa hate each other, and you call this a family?" Sarah felt his words like a slap. Ben walked out and did not return until midnight. The next morning, Walter found him sleeping on the couch. "You're helping me today," Walter said. "I'm not." Walter threw an apron onto Ben's chest. "If you eat my food and sleep under my roof, you can work for 4 hours." Ben expected his mother to defend him, but Sarah remained silent. Walter took Ben into the kitchen and showed him how to make pancakes. At first, Ben acted bored. Then Walter challenged him to flip a pancake without breaking it. Ben failed 3 times. On his 4th attempt, the pancake rose into the air and landed perfectly in the pan. A small smile appeared on his face. Walter pretended not to notice. By the end of the day, they had created a new pancake recipe with apples, cinnamon, and warm maple syrup. Ben named it the Cedar Stack. It became the first new item on the menu. Evelyn's place reopened on a rainy Saturday morning. Sarah expected 10 customers. More than 60 people arrived. Some remembered Evelyn. Others came because they had seen Grace's handwritten sign beside the highway. A retired schoolteacher donated $50 to the kindness book. A young mother paid for an extra breakfast. A truck driver bought coffee for everyone sitting at the counter. For the first time in years, the diner was filled with conversation and laughter. An elderly man named Samuel Reed entered near closing time. His coat was wet, and he carried an old military backpack. Sarah recognized him as a man who sometimes slept near the bus station. Samuel ordered soup. When Sarah brought the bill, he counted the few coins in his hand. Before he could speak, Gracie opened the kindness book. "Someone already paid," she said. Samuel looked around the diner. "Who?" Gracie smiled. "It doesn't say. That's the best part." Samuel ate slowly, as though he wanted the meal to last forever. Before leaving, he asked Walter if anything needed repairing. Walter pointed toward a damaged section of the roof. Samuel returned the next morning with tools. He had once worked as a carpenter before losing his wife, his job, and eventually his home. In exchange for meals and a room in Walter's garage apartment, Samuel began repairing the diner. Walter did not admit it, but he enjoyed having another older man around. They argued about baseball, country music, and the correct way to sharpen a saw. The diner slowly became more than a business. It became a place where people came when they were hungry, lonely, frightened, or simply tired of eating by themselves. Sarah and Walter, however, still carried old anger. One evening, Sarah found a box hidden in Walter's closet. Inside were birthday cards addressed to Ben and Gracie. There were Christmas gifts, school savings bonds, and dozens of letters. All of them had been returned unopened. Sarah held up one of the envelopes. "You sent these?" Walter's face changed. "Every year." "I never received them." "They always came back." Sarah examined the address. It was correct. Then she noticed Ryan's handwriting on one envelope. "Return to sender. Family does not want contact." Sarah sat down slowly. Ryan had always told her that Walter wanted nothing to do with them. Whenever Sarah considered calling her father, Ryan reminded her of their old arguments. Now she understood that Ryan had deliberately kept them apart. "Why didn't you come and find me?" Sarah asked. Walter's voice became weak. "Because the last time we spoke, you told me to stay out of your life. I thought these returned letters were your answer." Sarah began crying. "I thought you hated me." "I was angry," Walter said, "but I never stopped loving you." For the first time since Sarah had returned, Walter hugged his daughter. Neither of them noticed Ben standing in the hallway. He had heard everything. That night, Ben removed the last photograph of his father from his bedroom wall. But instead of throwing it away, he placed it inside a drawer. He was not ready to forgive Ryan. He was simply ready to stop waiting for him. During the next 2 months, Evelyn's place became successful. Ben started waking up early to cook. He discovered that he was good at it. Gracie greeted every customer and made sure no one sat alone unless they wanted to. Sarah handled the money and advertising. Walter told stories about Evelyn. Even Samuel began saving enough money to rent a small apartment. But their happiness was threatened when Charles Baines, the owner of the development company, entered the diner. He wore an expensive suit and placed a contract on the counter. Walter had signed an agreement giving Charles the right to buy the property if the unpaid taxes were not settled by December 31st. The family had only 3 weeks. "You can't tear this place down," Gracie said. Charles looked at her handmade sign. "Business is business." Ben stepped forward angrily, but Walter stopped him. After Charles left, Sarah counted their earnings. They were still $11,000 short. "We're going to lose everything," she said. Walter removed the diner keys from his pocket. "No, you are not." He explained that he planned to sell his house and use the money to pay the taxes. "But where will you live?" Sarah asked. Walter looked around the diner. "I have spent too many years protecting an empty building. I won't lose my family to protect a house." Sarah shook her head. "We are not letting you lose your home." They decided to hold a Christmas dinner to raise money. They printed flyers. "Christmas at Evelyn's place. Pay what you can. Nobody eats alone." Then the weather forecast changed. A powerful winter storm was moving towards Cedar Hollow. Schools closed. Roads became dangerous. People cancelled their plans. By Christmas Eve, heavy snow had covered the highway. The diner was empty. Sarah looked at the untouched food. "We failed." Walter turned off the front lights. Then someone knocked on the door. It was a sheriff's deputy. A bus carrying 23 passengers had slid off the highway. No one was seriously injured, but they needed a safe and warm place to stay. Within an hour, the diner was filled with stranded travelers. Among them were a pregnant woman, 2 college students, a young soldier going home, an arguing married couple, and a children's choir. The storm knocked out electricity across the town, but Samuel had repaired the diner's old generator. Ben and Walter cooked everything in the kitchen. Sarah made beds from tablecloths and blankets. Gracie asked the children's choir to sing Christmas songs. People who had entered as strangers began talking, laughing, and sharing stories. The arguing couple apologized to each other. The young soldier called his mother. The pregnant woman said that if her baby was a girl, she would name her Evelyn after hearing the story of the diner. At midnight, Walter stood near the counter and watched everyone. "This is what your mother wanted," he told Sarah. "Not just a restaurant. A place where people remember they still belong somewhere." Suddenly, Walter dropped his coffee cup. He grabbed his chest and fell to the floor. "Dad!" The roads were blocked, and the ambulance could not reach them. The young soldier was also a trained medic. He checked Walter's pulse and realized he was having a heart emergency. The passengers formed a chain to clear snow from the diner's back entrance. Samuel used his truck and an old snowplow attachment to open part of the road. Sarah sat beside Walter and held his hand. "You are not leaving me again," she said. Walter looked at her weakly. "I never wanted to leave." The ambulance finally arrived and took him to the hospital. Walter survived. 2 days later, Sarah sat beside his hospital bed. "We saved the diner," she told him. Walter looked confused. One of the stranded passengers had recorded the Christmas Eve gathering and posted it online. The video of strangers helping Walter spread across the country. People began donating to Evelyn's place. Former customers sent money. Travelers stopped by to leave donations. A restaurant owner in Chicago donated new kitchen equipment. But the most surprising visitor was Charles Baines. He entered Walter's hospital room carrying the original contract. "My mother raised 4 children alone," Charles said. "Evelyn fed us many times when we couldn't pay." He looked down at the contract. "I had forgotten what this place meant." Then he tore the contract in half. The donations paid the property taxes. The remaining money created a small community fund for local families in trouble. 6 months later, Evelyn's place had a new roof, bright windows, and a larger sign. Evelyn's place. Nobody eats alone. Ben decided to study culinary arts after high school. He still missed Denver sometimes, but Cedar Hollow no longer felt like a prison. Samuel became the diner's official maintenance manager and moved into a nearby apartment. Sarah stopped thinking of her return as a failure. She realized that sometimes going home does not mean moving backward. Sometimes it means returning to the part of yourself that was waiting to heal. On the first anniversary of the diner's reopening, Sarah found Walter sitting alone at a table. She placed 2 pieces of apple pie in front of him. "You know the rule," she said. "What rule?" "Nobody eats alone." Gracie climbed into the chair beside him. Ben came out of the kitchen. Samuel joined them with 4 cups of coffee and 1 glass of milk. Walter looked at the family gathered around him. For 20 years, he had believed that the empty chairs inside the diner represented everything he had lost. Now every chair was filled. Outside, cars moved along the highway beneath the warm red sign. Inside, a family that had nearly fallen apart shared pie, stories, and laughter. They had not erased the past. They had built something better from its broken pieces. And for the first time in many years, everyone was finally home.